Hello, everyone, and welcome to one of our Wednesday morning webinars. We do these webinars fairly frequently now, and the idea behind them is to talk to people who are trying to make a difference in their communities, who are working with others to make a change for the better. And we're going to look at a particular problem now that people don't always think about. We often talk about children who are abused, but we don't often think about parents who get abuse from their children, often because they're special circumstances, behavioral problems, and so on. And we're going to interview Joe Lettiere here, who actually works in a sort of family-based solution organization to try and help and address this problem. And he'll tell you about that in a minute. But before we start, let me say, if you're on our webinar system, you can put in your comments or your questions on the right. If you're following us on Facebook, then you can put your comments under the Facebook stream, and we'll try and pick them up and put them to Joe. And if you belong to any group or page that you would like to share this with, that would be great too, because that increases the sort of viewing of this webinar. So do that if you can. Anyhow, Joe, thank you for joining us today. And maybe we could start by asking you if you could, first of all, tell us something about yourself and how you got involved in the work that you do.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity. I was a learning mentor in a local secondary school for about 11 years. And a case came to the light where a young person wasn't attending school. When we looked into it, what we discovered was that as much as the parent was trying to get this young man into school, he just refused and became physically violent towards his mother. We tried to refer it onto social care, but it didn't meet their threshold for an intervention. And we were just left with calling the police. And from that, it was apparent, well, we weren't quite sure of the extent of the problem, but the three colleagues and my two colleagues, the founders, decided that we would try and look into it and start a charity to see if we could support families in similar situations.
You're part of a national network, aren't you, called PAARS, the Parent Abuse and Reconciliation Service, but you also have a presence in Enfield, is that right?
We are not a national service. We started off in Enfield solely, so supporting parent carers in Enfield. We now are supporting parent and carers in Enfield, Haringey and Barnet.
So you're not a part of the PAARS network, which I gather relaunched itself last Friday?
PAARS network.
That's the Parent Abuse and Reconciliation Service.
Yes, that was our a name originally, yeah.
And you actually relaunched your website and so on, haven't you, recently?
Yes. So we did that because we wanted to change the name, and because at the beginning it served us well because that's what we did, but the service provision has extended a lot more since then, and the name didn't really reflect the breadth of our provision, but also it was a very negative connotation. It was difficult for young people and sometimes parents to accept that word abuse. So we wanted something that reflected the way we work, which is with the whole family using solution-focused interventions. So we came up with a new name and relaunched the website last Friday.
I mean, some people might be really surprised because they can understand how children may be abused, and that's in the news all the time. But to hear parents are abused, for some people that may be new to them, but it is a problem, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's one that was very under-researched when we started in 2012. The information is getting out there. When we started in 2012, I think there was probably 5 organisations UK-wide that dealt specifically with child-to-parent abuse. But in the ensuing 6 years, it's reached over 40 interventions. So food routes, so either through youth offending teams or organisations like ourselves that have set up charities to support families in this situation. The research is still very thin on the ground.
Okay, so, you know, how do people make contact with you? I mean, is it parents who come to you and say, look, there's a problem? Is it children that come to you? Is it the local authority or other organizations who refer to you? How do you know where the children are and the parents are in the family that you want to deal with?
So we are part of the early help interventions through the local safeguarding hub. So we get a lot of referrals through social workers, through CAMS, self-referrals. So parents can self-refer if they want to contact us. We can arrange an initial meeting at the office. The referrals come through the police, CAMS. So it's quite a wide range of ways into the service. But more importantly, parents can just call us and come in and meet us and see if it's the right intervention for them.
And how often would you get a call or a referral, say, in a working week?
We would probably get about 3 to 4 referrals a week at present. We often get calls from outside of London and sometimes abroad, and we try and direct them to services within the local area. In the past year, we've seen an increase in referrals of about 116%, so more than doubled. And that's probably down to going into 2 other boroughs, but also lowering the age, because we only used to work with adolescents before, but now we're doing working with 6 to 18-year-olds. So we're getting a lot of younger service users now. So
when you set this up, that must have been a daunting task, really, because you're starting from nothing, except that you were in schools and you saw the problem and you saw that there was a vacuum there. I mean, how did you set up the network? First, getting the referrals, getting the people that can help, working with the police, working with social workers. It must have been a huge job to do. How did you set about doing that?
So the first thing we all knew from the beginning was that it had to be a whole family intervention, and that we wanted to be a charity, because we obviously didn't want to charge service users and families for the services that we provided. So the first step was setting up as a charity, and then looking for some seed funding, just to see in the first year whether the organisation had any merit or whether we were going to get any referrals. So when we put in our first bid to the lottery, it was really more of a, let's see in the first year how it goes. We estimated we may get 18 families referred in the first year, and we got 45. So it kind of showed us that there was a need there. And with that evidence and research, we were able to go for a lot more funding. Obviously, once we got the funding from the lottery, then it was sent out meetings with all the potential referrers, so schools, CAMS, social care. The police came later on down the line, but we got ourselves physically into places and told people that this is what we're doing and how to refer to us. So what sort of children is it that actually do abuse parents? Are there children, for example, who are excluded from school, children who benefit from SEND services, or are there other types of children as well with other particular problems that they are faced with that also come to you? Yeah, I mean, the biggest indicator in the referrals that we've had over the past 6 years, so we're looking at over 500 families now, and 76% of those would have been children who grew up in homes where there was domestic violence between the adult caregivers. So that was the main problems that we were facing. So children that had witnessed abuse in the home, that frustration and anger was a normal everyday occurrence. The rest of the referrals we get, maybe a quarter are children that have SEN or an educational healthcare plan or on the way to getting one. It's difficult to say what a typical case would be, but if you ask me what's the biggest indicator of a child may go on to become abusive, it's witnessing domestic abuse in the home, because it's so damaging.
So do you link up with organisations that work with domestic abuse and organisations that deal with SEND students? I mean, do you have a network of voluntary organisations?
We often will get referrals through those routes, so through people like Solace, and schools particularly are the biggest referral route. So it's often a place where parents may go in the first instance for support. So the biggest referral route is through schools, through SENCOs in schools. So we work closely. So we would attend any team around the family meetings, work together with other professionals, and refer on if we feel that there's another organisation that can also provide support for the family as well. But generally, the referrals come in through schools and social care. And at the moment, we're probably looking at 95% coming from Enfield, not so much from Haringey and Barnet at the moment, but actually we're kind of inundated with the work we've already got. So it's not something we go out and advertise. It's just we've been around for 6 years now, and most organisations know who we are and where to refer.
I mean, they know who you are now, but when you started out, did you find any resistance from social workers, schools and so on to contact you? And you had to gain their trust. I mean, what happened there?
I think the fact that we were all workers in schools anyway and knew the system and who to approach wasn't an issue. Referrals from social care, there's never been a problem where we've had to persuade people to refer, because it was a unique intervention in that sense. There wasn't anywhere else to refer it.
Okay, so tell us a bit about the service that you have. I mean, what is the service that you provide to the families, the children and the parents?
Yeah, so the main intervention is direct work with the family. So it would be whether there's one parent, two parents, and as many children that can attend, because everyone is affected. It's not just the child and the parent. There are siblings that are often abused as well, either directly or emotionally through witnessing the abuse. So we provide 2 solution-focused practitioners to each family, and we meet with them on a weekly basis. And the intervention can go on for as long as it's useful. So there's no time limit, in the sense that we don't say, right, here's a 12-week program and then it's finished. So we will continue with the families for as long as they find it useful and there's forward movement. We also provide parent support groups, so parents can come together at our office on a Tuesday and meet other parents, because it's often a very isolating, stigmatizing thing to admit to. So having that support network of other parents going through the same or similar situations has been a very useful intervention. We also provide the Domestic Abuse Recovering Together program, which is an NSPCC initiative. So this is a 10-week program where we look at the harm caused by the domestic abuse once the perpetrator's left the home, because often the emotional damage that's done by that has still not been addressed. So we have that program where once the perpetrator's left the home with the parent and the child to repair the relationships and look at how people have been affected by the abuse. We put that intervention in place simply because of the amount of referrals we were getting where domestic abuse was a factor. So we wanted to put that intervention in place to hopefully support young people so they don't go on to be perpetrators or victims themselves. We also provide, quite recently, a solution-focused parenting program. So that's 5 weeks at the office. People can self-refer to that again or through services if they wish. We've also started to provide yoga and mindfulness sessions for young people. So we do that on a Tuesday after school. And we've got a little social club starting through the Tottenham Hotspur Foundation. So we get a couple of their mentors come in, and it's a safe space for the children to come and just be themselves and enjoy themselves. We also obviously provide support to parents in school meetings, social services meetings. And often once parents come through it, they begin to volunteer for us. So there's volunteering opportunities. And for families that are referred, and only families that are referred, we can provide budgeting, financial advice, because often a lot of the families that we've worked with may be struggling financially. It just takes away a little bit more pressure, because if you're worrying where your rent's coming from, it's a bit difficult to focus on a relationship with my child. So that's another thing that we provide as well.
Okay.
And obviously, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, so just give us some idea of the process. I mean, supposing right now a school contacted you or a social worker and said, look, I'm a bit worried about this particular child. What's the steps you would take, like stage one? Right.
So we would make contact with the parent and we would arrange an initial meeting at the office, often usually with the parent on their own at first. It just gives the parent more space to say, to be honest, and let us know what's actually happening. So then from there we would arrange a meeting, convene with the parent. So it's often in the evenings because children may be at school, parents may be working. So we often do evening visits at the office, or we also open on a Saturday for anybody that just cannot get here during the week. We then allocate 2 family support workers to each family, from a list of up to 23 volunteers now with different backgrounds, different experiences. We try to match the best workers to each family. And the initial meeting with the family would be more around what they would like to see instead of the problem. So we don't focus too much on the problem and its history, because when we used to work like that, it became very stressful because people were just blaming each other and we never really got anywhere. So the first meeting is basically asking the family what needs to happen so we don't need to meet anymore. So we work with the outcome right from the start.
Do you at all ever get referrals from the police, for example, who say that we don't want to, charge this person, they really need help, can you intervene for us?
We did meet with the police last year, and we have a special referral form for the police to fill in, because what the police were telling us was we don't want reams of paper because we've got enough paperwork to fill out. So we made the referral form very, very short for them. So the police can refer directly. Now, if what the police say to us, if they get to a home and a crime has been committed, their priority is the public safety. So they often telling us that they would arrest. But in reality, we know that doesn't often happen. So if the parent does call the police, the child's calmed down, they will then say, you can refer on to PAARS. We have, family-based solutions.
Okay. Now, obviously, you are dealing with children who are, abusing their parents, but your approach is not a punitive one, is it? It's one that's based upon, a solution-focused approach that's based on engagement and reconciliation.
Yeah, it's very much a collaboration. Everyone has to have a role. So if we ask them what are their best hopes, so that would be normally the opening question, what are your best hopes from our working together? It indicates that it is a collaboration. We are working together. Everyone has a role. So if it's that, we want to argue less. Often it's around communication, arguing less shouting. It's surprisingly quite rare to hear that they want the violence to stop. Some parents just say, I want to understand my child better. I want to be able to support them better. And then the child will be asked, so what is the best way that your parent can support you when you do feel angry or when you do feel stressed? And it's opening up that communication. Because with the solution-focused approach, what we're looking for is those moments when the problem isn't as severe, when the families are getting along better or are coping with anger a bit better. What was different then, rather than focusing on the problem, which then can become overwhelming. And the families will come up with their own solutions. I very rarely give them a solution unless I have to, and be a bit more directive, maybe with younger people, make suggestions. But I want the words to come out of their mouth, because otherwise you kind of go, well, I didn't say I was going to do that. You said I was going to do that. Language is really powerful.
I mean, what you're doing sounds at times for you very stressful. What support do you get?
We obviously get supervision. So we often will talk to each other and talk about cases. But with this way of working, because it's not punitive and not focusing on the problem so much, it's actually a really nice way of working, not just for the families, because they leave here feeling a bit more hopeful. But we don't take on a lot of the baggage. And one of the most difficult things for us to understand when we first started working with this way was we didn't really need to know so much about the problem.
And you also have programs that support you, so you're not alone, are you? I mean, there's the DART program, which I see is on your website, and you take an approach which is sort of a national approach, the BOSS approach, building on strengths and solutions. Are those things important to help you and give you some solid base?
Yeah, so often children will have frustrations at school. It could be ongoing bullying. It could just be that having a really tough time engaging in their learning, and that frustration comes out at home, because that's the safe place to let it all out. Often schools will say, we don't see a problem with this child. He's absolutely fine. But like I say, when they get home, the frustrations come out and the parent are the ones that suffer. So the building on strengths and solutions is an early intervention into the mental well-being of the young person. So the schools may refer children for lack of confidence, for behaviour issues, whatever the school sees the issue, they refer them into the BOSS program. And we would work with those students for 6 weeks, then have a follow-up session, again using the solution-focused approach. The children are, again, it's a collaboration. What does that young person want to work on? So the school may say, we think he's got behaviour problems. The child may say, I want to work on my confidence. So we would go with what the young person wants, because it's not so much about who thinks is the right problem. It's realising that I actually have some agency. I can make a difference. I can make a change. If this is my outcome, how do I get there step by step? It's a very small changes that we're looking for. The small changes can often lead to bigger successes along the way. So that, yeah.
I was going to say, when you get parents or children refer to you and so on, and you've got this really solution-focused approach, but when you contact them first, do you get many who are in denial?
Not often, no. In denial that the relationship is abusive, or that the problem isn't happening?
Both.
No, I mean, parents are our clients. Parents are the ones that come forward and want the support. We are a charity. We're a completely voluntary intervention. So it's not a case of, if you don't engage with us, X, Y, and Z will happen. It's, let's just sit down, give you a safe space to have an honest and open conversation, and let's see what we can do about it.
Okay. Now, I see from various sites that you're looking for volunteers to help you. Now, what would you want these volunteers for?
The volunteers can either help us with fundraising, administration, doing some work in the office, but generally we'd like them to help us support families. So volunteers would need maybe 2 hours a week. They would get some training, solution focused, training in child protection, obviously all be DBS checked. Then volunteers will sit in with an experienced worker and see a family all the way through, rather than swapping and changing. It's better to have that consistency for the family, but also for the volunteers.
So just to get that clear, their commitment isn't huge. It's not
No.
like a 5-day week. It's 2 to 4 hours a week. Is that right?
And it could be as minimum as 2. So often the sessions, sometimes they can last an hour, hour and a half. Sometimes they can be very short, because with the follow-up sessions, what we're looking for is what's been better since we last met. And it's looking at those, like I say, those exceptions to the problem and how they manage to do that. The other beauty with that is not only do they come up with their own solutions, but when things start to work, they can also say, I actually did that. So it's empowering them to, it's empowering the families to say, I actually came up with that and it's working. Because if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're kind of in a loop and it doesn't get solved.
And do you want voluntary associations to contact you as well, not just individuals, but associations working in this area so that you can work collaboratively?
Yeah, I mean, we have had meetings with other agencies, and we always we're very open and honest. We've even said if you want to sit in some of our sessions with the parents' permission. So we are very open with our statistics. We've often helped in research. And we are looking at networking with other agencies. So, young carers, SEN agencies, domestic violence agencies. The biggest problem is this issue doesn't really get the sympathy of the public. If you're honest with yourself, you would say, why can't a parent control their 6-year-old or their 7-year-old? So it's very, very difficult to get that kind of empathy from the public. We need to look at this. If we don't intervene early now, we may be having people that go on to be abusers or perpetrators or victims in the future. Everyone knows the damaging effects of domestic abuse on not just families, but young people as well. That's been well documented for years. But we're not looking at this intervention as it should be, an early intervention into adult domestic abuse.
So one of the functions you see yourself as doing is creating awareness about this so that people understand that it's not about parental irresponsibility, they're deeper seated problems.
Exactly. Once we start apportioning blame, parents will often feel that where there have been to other agencies that they feel that they're being looked down on or feel blamed. And I think that's just human nature, because we often see the young person as, well, it must be a product of their environment, which often it is. Children don't wake up to be abusive. Children are not the problem, they're part of the solution, and so is the parent.
Okay, I mean, that sounds a really, really good approach. Do you work with the council at all, either in terms of collaboration or even funding?
The council like to refer. In terms of support, very little, actually, to be honest with you. And we actually prefer being a charity, raising most of our own funds, because then we avoid all the red tape. As a small organisation, if we feel there's a gap or we're not providing something, or we know someone who is, we can virtually put that in the next day. We don't have to go through X, Y, Z and get everything approved. So in terms of the council, the current mayor has been very supportive. We've met with some councillors who say they're very supportive, but then basically don't hear anything else. The council did recently give us the council chambers for free, which was fantastic. But in terms of what support they're providing us, it doesn't exist really. So
you're looking for funding to be self-sufficient. I mean, where in the long term do you think you will get that funding from?
We are going to have to, like most charities, with the cuts in statutory services, a lot of pressure is falling on the charities in the third sector. So we've already been told so we're funded by the big lottery, Reaching Communities, the Corporation of London, the City Bridge Trust, and the Tudor Trust. So they're our three main funders. we know and have been told by them that we cannot keep going back for funding unless we dramatically change the intervention. So we're going to have to be self-sufficient at some point. So the BOSS program is a service that is charged for, that we charge schools for. It's not a great amount, and schools can dip in and out. They don't have to provide, they don't have to sign in long term. And also through our solution focused training of professionals. So we train other professionals to work with families in the solution focused way. And that's again how we raise money. And also our own fundraising. So we had a labour pain challenge last year, Face Your Fears challenge in September. Aisha, one of the project managers, did a 2-day sponsored silence, which raised quite a lot of attention. And it was about letting the public know how difficult it is to come forward and speak up when things are happening. So skydiving, so we do as much of our own fundraising as we can.
I don't think I could do a 2-day sponsored silence.
She found it very difficult.
It is. And yeah, listen, we've sort of come to the end of our half an hour, but if anybody wants to find out more about you or volunteer, then how do they go about doing that? Yeah,
if they want to call us on our office number, which is 0208 363 6262, or on the office mobile 07220 651 633. I would rather they came in and we spoke to them face to face. We generally tell them what the service is about, what they need to commit to, and we let them go away and think about it. And then often they will come back with the paperwork, and they can start as soon as a case comes up. Okay, well, if you could post that up on Enfield Voices, and then we'll share it with other groups as well, that would be great, and that would, enable people to see how they can make contact. Well, anyhow, Joe, thank you for doing this, because I think you talked about a problem that lots of people don't realise that it's a real problem, and as you say, public awareness is really, really important about this. So I think you've done a good job in promoting the good job that you do, and also telling people about the fact a family-focused solution is the right way to go. So thank you for joining us. And thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, and we'll end this interview now.